Ever find yourself like totally glued to those crime procedurals? The ones where they're analyzing every little speck of evidence?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, get ready for a different kind of crime scene deep dives today. We're talking Linux forensics, diving into the nitty-gritty with excerpts from 3 white papers. And trust me, this isn't just for the tech whizzes out there.
That's right.
By the end of this, you'll see how understanding this digital detective work is relevant to, well, everyone.
It really is. In today's digital world, data breaches are a huge threat. And knowing how investigators piece together those digital clues, it's crucial, no matter your technical background.
So true. Okay, let's unpack this. One thing our sources emphasize is securing the digital crime scene. Seems kind of obvious, right? Like you wouldn't want to mess up a real crime scene with footprints or anything.
Right, you don't want to contaminate anything.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But why is this freezing process so important digitally? What's the big deal?
Well, think of it like this. Imagine someone at a crime scene accidentally steps on, say, a crucial piece of evidence. It throws everything off, right?
Totally.
Same principle applies in digital investigations. Even small changes, things you might not even think about, can have massive consequences.
Our sources even compare it to letting the criminal just walk away.
Yeah, they don't mince words, do they?
Boop. Legal issues, inaccurate damage assessments. The intruder could even dig deeper while you're none the wiser.
Exactly. The stakes are incredibly high. We're talking about the difference between cracking a case and hitting a dead end.
And it's not just about catching the bad guys either. If they still have access, the system's still vulnerable.
100%. And that's where it gets even wilder. One source mentioned rootkits. Sounds like something out of a spy movie.
Rootkits.
Yeah. Basically, it's digital camouflage for intruders.
Whoa. How do you even know if there's something like that hiding on a system?
That's the thing. Rootkits are designed to be stealthy. They can actually change system tools to hide themselves. So the system looks totally normal, even when it's compromised.
So it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the needle's invisible.
Pretty much. It's tricky. Investigators have to rely on their experience, look for anything out of the ordinary, and use specialized tools to find those subtle clues.
So if rootkits are basically invisible, how do investigators even begin to untangle these digital mysteries? It's like searching for ghosts in the machine.
You might be surprised. It often starts with tools everyone uses, like the find command.
Find. Really?
Yep. In the right hands, it goes from a simple file locator to a powerful forensic tool.
Wait, you're telling me basic Linux commands have a secret life as digital detective tools? I use find all the time. I had no idea.
It's all about how you use them. Investigators might use find with specific settings to pinpoint files modified at a very specific time, like during a suspected breach. Suddenly, those ordinary files could reveal the intruder's movements within the system.
Wow, that's amazing. So you need a sharp eye to spot these little anomalies. Do investigators have any special tools to help them?
Absolutely. One white paper talks about the Coroner's Toolkit, or TCT.
The Coroner's Toolkit, that's got a nice ring to it.
Right. It's a suite of applications made specifically for Linux forensics.
Okay, so like a digital detective's toolkit. What kind of tools are we talking?
One that stood out to me is called MacTime. It analyzes file timestamps.
Timestamps.
Yep. And they're crucial for figuring out what happened during an intrusion.
So like when a file was created, modified, or even just opened, makes sense. Those are like digital footprints all over the crime scene.
Exactly. By piecing those timestamps together, investigators can start to build a timeline of events. When did the intruder gain access? What files did they touch? What was their goal? It all starts to come together.
It's like putting together a digital jigsaw puzzle, one timestamp at a time. But even if they manage to freeze the digital crime scene perfectly, don't experienced hackers try to cover their tracks?
Oh, absolutely. Hackers are always coming up with new ways to hide their activities, making the investigator's job even tougher. And one way they do this is by exploiting a common misunderstanding.
And what's that?
That deleting a file makes it disappear completely.
Wait, so even if you empty your computer's trash bin, it's not really gone?
Not necessarily. See, deleting a file removes it from the user's view, but the data is often still on the hard drive until new data overwrites it. Think of it like erasing pencil marks. You might still see a faint trace.
Ah.
Investigators use special tools, like UNRM, that can potentially recover this deleted data.
So even if hackers think they're being super careful, they could still be leaving clues behind.
Exactly.
It sounds like this digital detective work needs a deep understanding of how computers work at their core.
Absolutely. It's a field that never stands still, always evolving as technology advances. Hackers are always finding new techniques to hide their activities, and investigators need to stay one step ahead.
It's like a digital game of cat and mouse with incredibly high stakes.
Okay, so we've got these digital detectives, right? They've got their tools all laid out, ready to dive into like the aftermath of a digital break-in.
Right.
But where do they even start? I mean, it's one thing to have the tools, but it's like mountains of data, right? How do you make sense of it all?
It's true. It can be overwhelming. It's kind of like putting together a puzzle, but instead of a picture on a box, you've got bits of code, log entries, timestamps.
Right.
Actually, one of our sources, they give a real-world example that shows this really well, a case study.
Oh, perfect. What kind of case are we talking about here?
So this particular case involved a server that had been compromised. And investigators, they suspected the breach happened through a vulnerability,
Yeah.
a known weak point in a service called Mounted. Mount. Okay, that's ringing a vague bell.
Mhm.
But what is it? And how do hackers actually use it to get in?
So Mount, it's basically a service used for sharing files over a network. It lets different computers access files on each other's systems.
Okay, so far so good.
But the vulnerability in this case, it let attackers bypass all the security measures and, gain access to that server without permission.
So it's like leaving the front door to your house wide open and hoping nobody with bad intentions just wanders in?
Exactly, a perfect analogy. And once they're in, they can do some real damage, steal data, install malware, even use that server to attack other systems.
That's a scary thought.
Mm-hmm.
So how'd they start tracking this intruder's steps? You mentioned earlier that the source talks about finding clues in a log file, but those things always look like gibberish to me.
I know, right? Log files can be intimidating if you're not used to them. But to investigators, they're gold mines of information.
Really?
They keep a record of all the events, all the actions happening on a system, so it's like a timeline of activity.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like a security camera, but instead of video, it's lines of code.
That's a great way to put it. And in this case, one line stood out. It showed a connection attempt, but from an external IP address trying to access the server's telnet port.
Telnet. Now, that does ring a bell. Isn't that like an older way to remotely access a computer?
Yeah.
Less secure these days, right?
You're exactly right. Telnet is old school, and it's considered insecure because it transmits data, even passwords, in plain text. Anyone snooping around can see it.
So not ideal then.
Not at all. So seeing this Telnet connection in the log file, it was a huge red flag.
It's like seeing muddy footprints leading into a house that's just been robbed. Pretty clear sign something fishy's going on.
Exactly. And this is where those timestamps we talked about earlier, they become crucial.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Investigators can use them to check, did that suspicious Telnet connection happen at the same time as any other shady activity? File changes, login attempts, that kind of thing.
So it's all about connecting the dots. Like those crime dramas, the detectives have that big board with photos and red string connecting everything.
That's exactly what it's like. You're weaving a story from the evidence. But remember how we said skilled hackers, they try to cover their tracks?
Yeah.
One way they do this is with hidden directories.
Hidden directories. What? So not just files tucked away in random folders. These are like digitally invisible folders.
Yeah. In a way, yes. Hackers can use the way the system reads certain characters, and they can create these directory names that are basically invisible unless you know exactly what you're looking for. The source gives the example of using...
Yeah, like the punctuation mark.
Yep, exactly that.
It's like having a secret room that only you know how to get into because you rigged up some hidden door.
Perfect analogy. It's hiding in plain sight. You could be looking right at it, but unless you know that strange name, you'd never find it. Makes things that much harder for investigators.
Hackers really do seem to go all out to make things difficult.
Mm-hmm.
What other tricks do they have up their sleeves? I'm starting to get a little paranoid over here.
You're right to be security conscious. And as we get into some of the techniques hackers use to really obscure what they're doing, it's important to remember knowledge is power.
So the more we know about how these digital attacks work, the better we can protect ourselves.
Absolutely. And the stuff described in these white papers, it shows just how creative, how persistent some of these hackers are. For example, one source talks about a tool called BurnEye.
BurnEye. Intense. What does that one do?
Okay, so picture this. It's like BurnEye lets hackers wrap their malicious software in a layer of encryption. It's like finding a locked chest, but you don't have the key to open it.
So even if investigators find the malware, it's useless without that key.
You got it. It just highlights how important those more advanced forensic techniques are, things like reverse engineering, cryptography.
It's like you need a whole other set of specialist skills just to crack the code, literally.
Exactly. And it's not just burn eye. The sources also talk about tools like ELF, which also use encryption to make analysis a nightmare.
Man, this really shows that digital forensics is constantly changing. It's like this back and forth battle between the investigators and, well, the people trying to break into systems.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Which brings us right back to that cat and mouse game we were talking about earlier. Hackers are always developing new ways to get into systems, to mess with them, and to cover their tracks.
It's kind of mind-blowing, really, this whole hidden world of digital activity going on right under our noses. It makes you realize how much we rely on systems we don't fully understand.
It's true, but while it can feel overwhelming, remember, even just being aware of it is a huge step in the right direction.
That's a good point. But with all these tools and strategies hackers have, can investigators even keep up? Or is it a losing battle?
Well, it's definitely a challenge. But investigators, they rely on their experience, their skills, and staying up to date on all the latest attack methods. They have to think like the hackers, try to anticipate their next move.
So it's not enough to just know the tools you need, the strategy, the psychology of it all. It sounds like a pretty unique skill set.
Oh, definitely. You need that technical knowledge, sure, but also analytical thinking and a good dose of curiosity.
Makes sense. I can see why it'd be so fascinating, like solving a puzzle, but with real-world consequences.
Exactly.
And speaking of consequences, what does all this mean for, well, the average person? Like, I don't work in cybersecurity. Why should I care about hidden directories and all that?
That's a really important question. Because even though you might not be analyzing compromised systems yourself, just knowing about these techniques, it shows you how important cybersecurity really is for everyone. It highlights how vulnerable our digital lives are if we don't take it seriously.
So it's not just about, like, government secrets or company data. It's about our own personal stuff, too.
Exactly. Your photos, your financial info, all of it.
Right. And while we've talked about some pretty high-tech hacking, I guess a lot of breaches come down to just basic security slip-ups.
It's true. And the good news is there's a lot you can do to protect yourself. Strong passwords, keeping your software updated, and of course being wary of suspicious emails or links, those go a long way.
Basic, but important.
Yeah.
But our sources also mention something else, the attack of cleaning. Now, that sounds straight out of a spy movie.
It does, doesn't it? It's a pretty creepy thought, actually. Imagine someone breaks into your system, does whatever they wanted to do, and then wipes away every single trace of them being there.
So you might never even know you were hacked. That's unsettling. It's like there's this whole other level to the internet, one we don't even see.
There is. And that's why it's so important to be proactive, to be thinking about security, even if you don't have the skills to analyze a hacked system yourself. Just being aware, taking those precautions, it can really make a difference.
Like learning about common scams, the more you know how they work, the less likely you are to fall for them.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing, if slightly terrifying, look into the world of Linux forensics.
It's a wild world out there.
That's for sure. Big thanks to our expert for walking us through it all.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about these digital threats, the better we can navigate this ever-changing online world. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.